Hello and welcome again to another episode of the Long Gone Loser Rock Show. Today I'm going to talk about one of the greatest, in my opinion, rock and roll records of all time. I'm talking about Appetite for Destruction. Let's go. There is no denying the impact that Appetite for Destruction had on 80s rock and roll and heavy metal way back in the day. The way I discovered this album way back in 87 was that on 3D radio, which was called Triple M Radio back in the day, we had a program run by a guy named Mal Capone. And Mal would always play the latest, like greatest rock bands, metal bands, or whatever that were coming through. And I remember he played like some advanced promo of this band, Guns N' Roses. And the song that I heard from memory was My Michelle. And immediately I was like, oh, wow, this rocks. I love this. This is so good. I remember hearing this towards the end of 87. Now, the reason that I remember this day specifically was because I'm pretty sure it was the last time that my mum and dad were ever in the same space together because they separated when I was younger and they never really talked after that. But I remember going to the city with them one day, and I'm not sure why. Maybe they were finalizing divorce papers. I don't remember that. But I do remember them taking me to Veranda Music. So I told them that I wanted to buy a record, and the record I wanted to buy was this one, right? This was $14.99. And that was all the money that I had at the time. Now, this would have been around December 87 because I was on school holidays, obviously, because I wasn't at school when my mum and dad took me to the city. And so I remember it had a sticker on here saying, this record contains material which may be considered offensive. I remember buying the record and in the car on the way home, I took out the inner sleeve and the first thing I'm greeted with is this Robert T. Williams drawing, which was originally the front cover, but deemed too offensive apparently. But I sat there and read all the lyrics and I'm sitting in the car and I'm a young kid and I'm reading all this stuff like with your bitch slap rapping and your cocaine tongue, you get nothing done. And then I'm like reading the lyrics to like It's So Easy. They're dropping F bombs at the end of the song nonstop. But not just that, the whole album is just filled with, swearing and all this sort of stuff. And I'm just sitting there reading it going, I can't let my mum hear this record. She's going to freak. Now, I put this on cassette tape and I remember taking it to school. And what I used to do is I used to take a tape recorder that was like this big. And I had one of those canvas bags that all the metalheads had back in the day where you'd write all your band names that you loved on it and whatever and draw on it and stuff, do graffiti bags or whatever. And they were like these canvas bags. You used to get them at the army disposals and they were pretty cheap. But every metalhead rocker had one of these bogans, whatever. You know what I mean? We all had them. That was our thing. It had Venom on it and Metallica and Ozzy Osbourne and Motorhead and all this sort of stuff, because that's what I was into. And I think I even might have had like Run DMC written on it, and because I was really into Run DMC at the same time. I love Run DMC. I still do to this day. Fantastic group. I remember the bands that I'd featured on there were very diverse. But anyway, Guns N' Roses ended up on the bag, and I took my tape recorder, like I said, inside this canvas bag. Now, there was no room for my books. So I don't know how. I think maybe I carried my books with me. I never had a locker at school, so I never put any books away in the locker. So I remember, you know, stuffing whatever books I needed for that day, like the, math or whatever. I stuffed them all into my bag and, they were squashed in with this big tape recorder. And so at lunchtimes, I would sit down on my own and just, listen to music. And I remember listening to Guns N' Roses by the school gymnasium outside at recess or something. And I remember a teacher walking past right as they said, why don't you just F off, like he says in It's So Easy. And I was just like, oh God. And they just stopped and they turned to me and they said something like, did they say what I thought they said? And I said, depends what you thought they said. I think he said get off. And they went, I thought he said something else. And they walked off. And I was like, oh my God. Because our teachers were very conservative to a degree. I mean, I had a couple of cool teachers. My English teacher was into really good music. He was awesome. Once you got to know him, he was a rad dude. He was into Dead Kennedys and, all that sort of stuff. So, but I just remember, like, people just like, "What is this crap?" They didn't like Guns N' Roses at all. Now, you gotta remember, this is at the beginning of '88. Now, Guns N' Roses still hadn't really broken in Australia yet. Even though the album had been out for, 4 or 5, 6 months by this time, they hadn't really broken. And so, I remember in '88, I went to see AC/DC at Globe Derby with my brother, and that was awesome. And I just remember raving about Guns N' Roses to everybody, and nobody cared. And then all of a sudden, Sweet Child O' Mine dropped, and it became massive. Like, it was huge, and everybody was into Guns N' Roses. And then all the people started saying, "Oh, can you tape me that album of Guns N' Roses?" And I was like, "No, you didn't care when I played them to you originally, so whatever." Still, this is the original copy that I got. As you can see, ringwear and all that. I've had this for a long time, and it's been thrashed, absolutely thrashed. And I still love this album to this day. So here we go. See, Geffen Records. There's the back cover. So as you can see, the 5 guys there. Now, I was so blown away by this record. Like, I listened to it every single day for like, I don't know, years on end. I still to this day think it's one of the greatest records ever put to tape. And, it's just a great rock and roll record. I love the guitar tones in this. I mean, it's pure. We've plugged a Gibson Les Paul straight into a Marshall JCM 800, and this is the sound you get. It's a really raw sounding record, and that's one of the reasons I love it. It's just a straight up great rock and roll album. I do remember one of the sad things about this is that, how tapes were always like 60-minute or 90 minutes? You would not get the full album on one side of a 90-minute tape. So you always had to put like, most of the songs and then, Rocket Queen on side B, and you put side A on 30 minutes on one side and side B on the other, whatever. I just remember that was one of the things that really frustrated me about this record was that it was like 48 minutes or something like that. And, Rocket Queen is possibly my favorite song on this record, especially like that last 2.5 minutes where it's like, down, 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 like that guitar riff and everything, like that tone that, that is played. It's just awesome. And then the whole breakdown at the end, I see you standing. And then it just picks up and kicks off. I love that. I think that song, Rocket Queen, is just fantastic from start to finish. And even now, I mean, I just listened to this again today and I was just blown away by how good it sounds. Like, this record sonically sounds amazing. And the songwriting is second to none. While I feel that Guns N' Roses could never live up to this, I do like, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, although it's a bit sporadic at times. I do love GNR Lives, but seriously, they really never captured what they got on this record. So whatever happened in the studio at this time, there was certainly some magic there. No filler. It was just all killer the whole way through. Appetite is one of those records where every single song on it could have been a hit single. And I think around the world, most of the songs were released on single. So it just goes to show the power and perfection of this album. This album to listen to in headphones is perfect because you get Izzy in one side and Slash in the other. And I think that's really cool because they're both playing something completely different. And it just seems to gel together and work really, really well. And hearing Appetite in headphones is the way that you really need to listen to it for a whole new experience, especially if you've got a really good headset as well. And for years, I listened to this record just in headphones. And I was so blown away by how intricate the actual guitar parts were, how they were playing something different, but it just seemed to complement each other really, really well. Over the years, I have interviewed tons and tons of bands. And time again, when we talk about records that moved them or whatever, Appetite always comes up. Always. I remember having a really good conversation with JD from The Sword about this record. And we were just, I don't know how we got there, but we just started talking about how good this record was and talking about the magic that was in the studio on that day and how it's rarely been replicated since, which is a testament, I guess, to just how good this album is. But yeah, I love it. To this day, I still put this on my original copy. It sounds a bit thin, but I don't care because I haven't bought the double LP version, which I really should get because this version has been thrashed. Appetite for Destruction is a 10 out of 10 record. Looking back on it this many years later, it still blows my mind how good it is. What an album. If you haven't heard it yet and you've dismissed this album for whatever reason, I urge you to check it out. If you like rock and roll music and you don't like Appetite for Destruction, I'd be pretty surprised because It's a really good rock and roll record. It sounds like Guns N' Roses were heavily inspired by the Australian rock and roll sound, and they added it with their own spice. And I'm talking about the likes of, Rose Tattoo, AC/DC, Stevie Wright, all that sort of stuff. I'm sure these guys were hip to that music and they were listening to it, and they just gave it their own raw energy and power. And thus we got Appetite for Destruction. Well, my friends, thank you for listening to me babble on about how good this record is. I've always wanted to talk about this record just because I love it so much. And yeah, look after yourselves, take care of each other, go buy some records, and revisit Appetite for Destruction if you haven't done it lately, especially in headphones. I'll see you in the next video, guys. Bye-bye.